You know what's worse than losing someone you love? Knowing exactly where they are and being powerless to reach them. Last time, I told you about Kunta, the warrior who fell in love with a woman the crown decided to claim. I told you about Amara, taken from her village, bound in golden cord, paraded before her people like property. I told you about Prince Subari, a man who confused desire with ownership. What I didn't tell you was what happened next. Because while Kunta stood in the rain holding a broken bracelet, Amara was being led through palace gates that hadn't opened for a commoner in 3 generations. And what she found behind those walls, what she learned about the man who claimed to love her, changed everything. This is episode 2. And I need to warn you. This one's going to hurt. The royal palace of Zambara sat on a hill overlooking 3 villages. White stone walls. Gold-plated doors. Gardens that required 20 workers just to maintain. My grandmother said it was beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful. Impressive to look at. Deadly to touch. When Amara arrived that night, she was escorted through corridors lit by 100 oil lamps. Past tapestries worth more than her entire village. Past guards who looked through her like she was already invisible. Past rooms filled with wealth she couldn't even comprehend. They didn't speak to her. Didn't explain where they were taking her. Just moved her. Like furniture. Finally, they stopped at a room. Not a cell, that's important. This was a guest chamber. Silk curtains. Carved wooden furniture. A bed larger than her father's entire workshop. The guard said, his voice cold. You will sleep here. Do not leave this room. The prince will send for you when he's ready. And then, a silence. Amara sat on the edge of that massive bed. This girl who'd spent her entire life sleeping on a woven mat. And for the first time since the platform, she let herself feel it. The fear. The rage. The absolute helplessness. But here's what you need to understand about Amara. She wasn't some damsel waiting to be rescued. She was a survivor. And survivors don't just sit in beautiful cages waiting to die. They observe. They adapt. They find the cracks in the walls. So Amara stood up. Walked to the window. And started mapping every detail she could see. Guard rotations. Exit points. Patterns. If she was going to survive this, she needed to understand the battlefield. The prince came for her at dawn. No warning. No courtesy knock. Just entered. Like it was his right. Which, technically, it was. Zubari looked different up close. Still handsome, that hadn't changed. But there was something in his eyes that didn't photograph well from a distance. Something cold. Calculating. He said, his voice smooth and charming but with an edge. Amara. You're even more beautiful in the morning light. You must be frightened. That's natural. But I want you to understand something. You haven't been taken. You've been elevated. Do you know how many women would kill for this opportunity? Amara looked at him, really looked at him, and said, controlled and careful. Then perhaps you should have chosen one of them, my prince. My grandmother said. The room went completely still. That Subari's smile never wavered, but something flickered in his eyes. Something dangerous. His voice stayed smooth but grew colder. You have spirit. I admire that. But let me be clear, Amara. I don't ask for things. I don't negotiate. I don't chase. I decide. And the world arranges itself accordingly. You will be my wife in 1 moon's time. You will smile during the ceremony. You will be grateful. And in return, I will give you a life your village couldn't even imagine. Amara asked quietly but firmly. And if I refuse? This is the part that still makes my blood run cold. Zuberi leaned in close enough that Amara could feel his breath, and whispered menacingly, "Then I will make an example of every person you've ever loved. Your father, the potter with the sad eyes, I'll have him arrested for unpaid taxes. Taxes I'll invent. That warrior who looks at you like you're the sun, I'll station him on the northern border where raiders slaughter soldiers for sport. Your friends, your neighbors, every child you've ever smiled at. I will systematically destroy every good thing in your life until you have nothing left but me. Or you can choose gratitude. The choice is yours, Amara. I'm nothing if not generous." He walked toward the door and said, "You have 3 days to adjust your perspective. I suggest you use them wisely." Amara stood there, shaking. Not from fear. From pure, concentrated rage. Because she'd just learned something crucial. Zuberi wasn't a man in love. He was a collector. And she was just another piece for his shelf. While Amara was learning the rules of her cage, Kunta was falling apart. For 3 days, he barely slept. Barely ate. Just sat in his hut, Amara's broken bracelet clutched in his hand, running through scenarios. Storm the palace, suicide. Challenge the prince to single combat, they'd never allow it. Rally the village, they'd be slaughtered. Appeal to the king, laughable. Every plan ended the same way. With everyone he loved dead. On the 4th morning, his sister Nia found him. She was 16. Brave. Stupid brave, the kind that gets people killed. She said, concerned. "Kunta, you need to eat something." He replied, hollow. "I'm not hungry. You need to sleep." "I can't." "You need to let her go." Kunta stood abruptly, angry. "Never." Nia grew frustrated. "Then what? What's your plan? You can't fight the crown. You can't negotiate with the crown. So what are you going to do, die for her? Because that's the only option you have left, and you know it." Kunta stared at his sister. And the worst part? She was right. He whispered, his voice soft and breaking. "I promised her. I promised I'd choose her every day. That I'd protect her." "What kind of man makes a promise he can't keep?" Nia said gently. "The same kind who loves someone more than his own life." "But Kunta, love isn't always enough. Sometimes survival means knowing when to surrender." Kunta looked at his sister. At her young face, still believing the world made sense. And he made a decision. He said, firm and resolved. "Then I'll die a fool." Back at the palace, Amara met someone who would change everything. Her name was Zara. Zara was 53 years old. A handmaid who'd served the royal family for 30 years. She'd seen 3 princes grow up. Watched 2 queens die, one from childbirth, one from mysterious circumstances. Zara knew where all the bodies were buried. Literally. She came to Amara's room on the 5th day with food. Set it down without a word. Started to leave. Amara said desperately, "Please. Can you tell me, is there any way out of this?" Zara stopped. Turned slowly. Studied Amara for a long moment. Then closed the door and sat down. She said, her voice older and weathered but wise. "You're not the first woman he's claimed, child. You're the 7th. Amara asked, horrified. "What happened to the others?" Zara replied matter-of-factly. "The first 4 refused him. Their families suffered accidents. The 5th tried to escape. They found her body at the bottom of the eastern cliffs. The 6th accepted her fate. She lasted 3 years before the prince grew bored. Now she lives in the western wing. Barely speaks. Barely eats. Pause. She's 24 years old, but her eyes are ancient. Amara's breathing became shaky as she processed this. So there's no way out. Zara leaned closer. I didn't say that. There's always a way out, child. The question is, what are you willing to sacrifice for it? Zara reached into her robe and pulled out a small cloth bundle. Unwrapped it carefully. Inside, a vial of dark liquid. She said seriously. Nightshade. Mixed with moonflower root. 3 drops in his wine, he'll sleep like the dead. 7 drops. He'll sleep forever. Amara was shocked. You're asking me to murder him? Zara replied sharply. I'm not asking you anything. I'm giving you a choice. The same choice I wish someone had given me 30 years ago. Amara stared at that vial. At the possibility it represented. At the cost. She said, conflicted. If I do this, they'll know. They'll execute me. Zara answered. Probably. But you'll die free. And sometimes, child. That's the only victory we get. She stood and walked toward the door. Think about it. You have 3 weeks until the wedding. After that, you belong to him forever. Amara sat alone, holding that vial. Turning it over in her hands. Watching the liquid catch the light. And for the first time since arriving at the palace, she smiled. Not from joy. From power. Because even in a cage, even with no good options, she still had a choice. That same night, something arrived in Nambara. A messenger. Young boy, maybe 12 years old. Showed up at Kunta's door covered in mud, gasping for air. The boy said breathlessly. Message for Kunta, from the palace. Kunta asked urgently. What message? Who sent you? The boy gulped air. A woman, older woman, palace handmaid. Said to give you this, said it's from her. Kunta's hands shook as he opened it. It wasn't signed. Wasn't addressed. Just 3 lines, written in rushed handwriting. The river still flows. The bracelet can be remade. Wait for the moon to wane. Pause, realization hitting. It was Amara. She was alive. She was thinking. She was planning. The river, their meeting place. The bracelet, their promise. The waning moon, 3 weeks. The wedding. She wasn't asking him to rescue her. She was telling him to be ready. Kunta looked at the boy. Did she say anything else? The boy said nervously, struggling to remember. The old woman said, I said to tell you. A warrior who dies for love is a fool. But a warrior who lives for love can change kingdoms. And just like that, everything shifted. Kunta wasn't going to storm the palace. Wasn't going to challenge the prince. Wasn't going to die a meaningless death. He was going to do something far more dangerous. He was going to wait. To prepare. To become the weapon Amara needed him to be. Because the crown had made a critical mistake. They'd given Amara a deadline. 3 weeks until the wedding. 3 weeks to plan. 3 weeks for 2 people who loved each other. To become something the kingdom had never seen coming. The elders have another saying. The lion who roars gives away his position. But the lion who waits chooses when to strike. Kunta wasn't roaring anymore. He was sharpening his claws. So now you know. Amara's not helpless, she's got poison and a plan. Kunta's not broken, he's got 3 weeks and nothing to lose. And Zubari? He has no idea what's coming for him. In episode 3, the real game begins. Amara starts playing the prince at his own game. Kunta does something that'll make you gasp. And we meet someone from Zuberi's past, who has their own reasons to want him dead. 3 weeks until the wedding. 3 weeks until blood hits the palace floor. 3 weeks until you find out whether love really can beat power. Hit subscribe if you want to see how this ends. Because I promise you, it's not what you're expecting. I'll see you in episode 3.